Welcome, welcome, everybody. We're excited to talk about one of the things that have been coming up a lot in conversation, not only with agents, but with clients. It is dun dun dun, the NAR settlement. And with me is my absolutely wonderful, not only business partner, but hubby, Jabez Labret. Hey, Jabez.
Hey, everybody.
So tell me what's going on with this NAR settlement. Let's just start there. What does that even mean? What is NAR?
NAR is the National Association of Realtors, and they were recently sued by some uh, sellers in Missouri and there's one in Texas and one in Louisiana. There's a few different states where there's some sellers who are having some issues with paying buyers' agents compensation.
Right.
So they were saying basically to boil it down, if I'm selling my home and I'm paying my real estate agent or broker commission to sell my home, why am I also paying the other party's representative, their agent? Like what why am I paying them? Shouldn't they be paying
Right.
them? And that was
Right.
kind of the gist of the lawsuit. I mean, it's a
And
little more complicated, but that's the
right,
gist.
right, right. And so tell me historically, have commissions been paid by the sellers and why?
Yes, so historically they have for a very, very long time, and that kind of started back in the early 1900s, like 1918 is when they began, having a percentage of the sale price be split between both brokerages.
Mhm.
So the seller would say, "I'm going to sell my home for $500,000," and they would decide on we'll say a 6% brokerage fee, and that 6% traditionally was split 50%, so 3% to the buyer's broker and 3% to the seller's broker.
Right. And that 6%, or, I'm assuming that quote unquote fixing of the percentage that has to be paid is kind of what has been the controversy with the settlement. Is that correct?
So that definitely was added into the settlement, and for pretty good reason. There was a lot of concern around the idea that everybody seems to be paying the same amount, even across multiple different brokerages. The truth is, there's been a lot of brokerages who offer all sorts of different pricing strategies when it comes to sellers selling their homes. In reality, what we were seeing on the ground is that most were charging the same amount in the same markets, and that is typically problematic. It does make it appear that there was price colluding, and I don't know that it really was going that far, that people were calling up each other and colluding on the price. It just seemed the market had settled on an amount. And so, in order to combat that and to kind of maybe try to create a little bit more of a fair market situation, what part of the settlement includes is that the people who are selling homes, if they are going to pay the buyer's agent, they no longer can post that payment in the MLS. So
Hmm.
currently, right now, if you're a real estate agent, you go into the MLS to look at houses and you can see how much they're going to pay you as a buyer's representative. And so it might
And
say
that
two and a
could
half
put
percent or
and that could potentially incentivize buyers agents to show certain properties over the other.
there's another
Correct.
problem,
That's
right? You
right.
don't want that. Like you shouldn't have that. If I'm your representative and my job and you and I are working together is to help find you a home, I shouldn't be cherry picking the homes that I show you as the only ones that are paying
Yeah.
3%. And I'm not
But
going to
it's
well, I'm
like
not going to show you that house because that's only 1%, and
But
I
it's
don't
like
want to.
economics 101, right?
Right.
It's like, you know, the person who is incentivized to go towards the higher price is going to go towards that higher price. Like that is, I mean, that is
Yeah.
exactly. But my problem with some of this is that the inventory isn't there. So I'm a
Right.
buyer's agent too, and I have such a limited pool of properties to be able to show to my clients. So I don't have the luxury of cherry picking a 1% buyer's agent commission versus a 3% buyer's agent commission. So, for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, I don't know if that really is incentivizing. People just want to get to the sale and do
I
what's
think
best for their clients.
I think what you're bringing up is an important point that I think you and most agents are acting in the best interest of their clients. mentally. Like they're thinking about their clients and
Right.
wanting the best for their anyone who is a real estate agent. When you go to buy a house, you don't really know how vested the real estate agent becomes because it's an emotional transaction for you, but the agent is also
Exactly. Yeah.
vested in you as a client. The
Mm.
problem is that even subconsciously, we wouldn't want a situation where an agent might steer a client one way or the other without even thinking
Right.
about it.
Hmm.
And so, that happens in life, and that's okay. I
Hmm.
think that this part of the settlement is a protection against that. And I don't think that it should be saying that agents are acting nefariously. I don't think that they are. I think most of them, not all, but most of them are acting very, in the best interest of their clients. The
Right.
problem is that we've created a system that's even accidentally included some of this unnecessary things that we can easily just get rid of. And so I think
Right.
that's what the settlement's trying to do is clean it up a little bit. And they're kind of
Hmm.
cleaning up the process, cleaning up the industry. Look, if this all happened in 19 like 18, I think we've learned a lot in 100 plus years. And we should be applying, some improved standards to the process, and maybe some improved approaches to the market than what's been going on for 100 years.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. And one thing I did want to bring up that came out in the settlement was there were brokerages that were specifically training agents to sell the 6%, 7%, 8% listing. And that was something that was problematic when they were finding that there were brokerages that were specifically training their agents to do that. That is a no-no. 100% that's a no-no.
Yeah, I mean it's the when you're training someone on how to do something, and then you say, okay, well, when you go into this meeting, here's what you should do. It had been kind of a, hey, you go in, be prepared to say, I charge 6% and know your value, know what you're
Right.
worth, and that's
Hmm.
the language that you would hear in the process. I think that the difference here is that legally you got to like Keller Williams and Remax shouldn't be talking to each other saying, "Hey, are you going to charge 6%? Because we'll charge 6% if you charge 6%, and then that way everybody's charging 6%." That's the
Right.
price fixing colluding problem. Then
And
it
that's why the
created a
MLS,
cultural problem.
right, and that's why the MLS is moving to remove that data so that it's
Right.
not like you're calling, Mr. Broker on the phone, Mr. Keller or whoever, and saying, "Hey, like what are you guys charging this year?" It's out there for everybody to see what the market rate is for
Yeah,
commission.
it was too easy. It was just it was
Right.
you didn't have to, Keller Williams didn't have to pick up the phone and call Remax. They just go on the MLS and they could just see it. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was like they weren't even having to try to collude. It was just kind of happening as the
Right.
market was moving, and it started to bring up a lot of questions really around pricing in general. And I think that's the more interesting kind of nuanced of the conversation here is there's a couple pieces of this settlement that are going to cause some market shifts. One of those big market shifts is going to be in buyers agents and buyers, and how do they pay each other and how do they work together and how do they get represented, and that's one big bucket of change. Another major area of change, I think, is how are sellers going to approach what they pay to the transaction to have their representation and marketing and all that stuff to get their home sold. So I think that this is really putting a good spotlight on taking the time to reanalyze how should this work, not
Hmm.
how has it worked, but how should it work moving forward.
Right.
And we haven't
Yeah.
had that conversation in a very long time.
Yes. So tell me about that part of the conversation. We've kind of talked about the issue and the problem at hand and what NAR has done right now, what they will be planning on doing. And I guess, spoiler alert, August is coming. And once August comes around, this is when a lot of the settlement changes will occur. So, what are you seeing? First of all, tell me the bullet points. What is going to change? What are the top things that are going to change due to this settlement come August? What should consumers look out for?
Yeah, so the judge just last week, which would have been the here mid-May, just kind of signaled approval for the August 17th date. So that's a big step forward in the August date to what you're talking about. There's a lot of little bullet points of what's going to happen with the settlement that are going to change little tiny things for realtors and paperwork and contracts and stuff that they have to do and places they go to publish and look at stuff. I think from a kind of a consumer level, like how is this going to impact you as a buyer or seller? Buyers are now going to have conversations with their real estate agents about how much does it cost to hire that real estate agent. Now, that doesn't mean the buyer's going to pay necessarily, but what is the cost to work with that real estate agent? And they're going to have to sign an agreement to be represented by that agent before they go look at a house. And that is
Hmm.
a huge step forward in the market. And that is really important because it used to be, I'll just go show you houses. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about us getting a contract together. And everybody's all willy nilly. And it's ridiculous.
And
This is a
also
massive
stating,
transaction.
and they would also state that it's free to work with a buyer's agent. Like that was the big talking point where it's like, my services don't cost you anything. And that is not that is not true. Somebody's paying
Yeah.
for it.
Um, yeah. And so but now what we're seeing on the buy side is that there's this, I think, important conversation that should have been happening that wasn't always happening, but is now
Hmm.
going to have to happen, which is
Right.
if you and I are going to work together, I'm going to help you find a house. Here's all of the things I'm going to do for you. And it is a
Right.
huge list. Helping someone find a house is a very hard job. It is
It's
a
a
lot of
full-time
work,
job.
a
Right.
lot of work. And
And there's
so
buyers who
they're
try
going
to
to
do it
say,
on their own
this is what I get
too.
paid.
And you can't handle two jobs at once. You have to have somebody come in and help. So that's what I've found.
And then once you get in the transaction, obviously there's the whole complexity of it running the transaction and making sure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. These are major purchases. This is a very complicated transaction. You want a professional in there. And so they're going to have to say and put on paper ahead of time, this is how much it cost for me to be your buyer's agent, whether you pay me or the seller pays me, or it's added on the financing in some creative way, or it's adding into closing cost in some way. This is how much it's going to cost at the end
Hmm.
of the day. It's not
Right.
saying who does pay for it. It's just saying this is the cost. That
Right.
is a important conversation that we have been lazy as agents and not having that conversation and pretending like we didn't need to worry about it and like we shouldn't have some sort of formalized agreement. In no other scenario would you hire a professional and not put an agreement in place.
Right.
In
And
no other industry would you do that. Period.
and tell me, in Washington, this has already been rolled out for a long time. You
Yeah.
have to operate in this way. But in
Yep.
California, this is coming in some of the other 50 states too. It's something that's coming. Tell me about that. Why is it like a state by state rollout?
Yeah, I mean, every state has their own regulations on how
Yeah.
they regulate their agents. And in Washington, they've been doing it for a while where it's mandatory to have the form in place anyway. What they
Hmm.
were getting away with, and one of the subtle changes that's happening is that no longer could you put on there the buyer's agent will accept whatever the seller's willing to pay. Now
Hmm.
you have to put an actual amount. And
Hmm.
so that part is new for pretty much every state, where it's no longer just saying, yeah, 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 you have to pay me, but it's whatever it's going to be. So we're again, we're kind of growing up here. We're getting a little bit more professional, and a little bit more buttoned up on these, and saying, look, this is how much this cost.
Hmm.
I'm going to charge $8,000, or I'm going to charge 2%, or whatever it is, 3%, and that's how much money I get at the end of the day for the transaction. And then we're going to determine later who and how it gets paid for at the end of the day. And so that's definitely changing for a lot of folks in all the different states. And I think it's an improved change. That's a very good thing for the market.
Okay, so tell me what it is that you're doing. You came up with this like really, I think it's a brilliant idea to have some of these kind of like fixed pricing and tiered pricing strategies, which is not new in the
Right.
industry, but I think the market is more ready for that, both on the seller side, the listing side, and the buyer side. Tell me about this right now and how this is rolling out and what the reaction in the market has been.
Yeah. The reaction's been super positive. What we've started to roll out here in Washington is a tiered pricing model, which basically says, as a broker, I have a list of services that I'm going to do. I don't have to do all of the services, but here's all the things I can do, and here's some of the non-negotiables, the things that have to happen in a transaction, whether that's the sell side or the buy side. And then the consumer, the buyer and seller are getting to choose, okay, I want this package, I want this type of service with these items, and then they know ahead of time that it's a fixed price, like it's going to cost this amount. So, if I'm selling my home, I know that I get all of these things for $12,000, and whether I sell my home for $600,000 or I sell my home for $700,000, it's still just $12,000. It doesn't. There's no percentage of the transaction. It is, you're paying for the services. You're paying to get work done. Once that work is done, this is the cost of that work, which is more aligned with kind of how the interaction is in the transaction. Real estate's a transaction service based business. And so in most service based companies, you have a scope of work. These are the things I'm going to do, and a price. This is how much that is going to cost. And so it tacking the percentage to the actual value of the home doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, so you're telling me that if you get an extra $50,000 for your home because you got multiple offers, I should get paid more? That the multiple offers have to do with the market economics, has nothing to do with really, I wouldn't say nothing, but it has most to do with the market economics and a lot less to do with the agent performing the duties. And so it just kind of seems to align better with what is actually happening. On the seller side, the other piece of the puzzle is going to be, do you pay the buyer's agent at all? And that's a conversation that people are going to start having. And so, our fixed pricing approach, our simplified pricing, gives a little bit of a more straightforward way to do that. To say, like, look, I'm going to pay my seller's brokerage this much money, and then I'm going to choose a flat fee, and I'm going to offer that to the other party. And if they want to pay their agent more or less, that's up to them, right? Because now it's been negotiated on that side. But I'm going to pay some. Maybe I'll pay some because I want to, attract more attention or get more people involved. I think it's going to get really complicated really quick. I'm already
Right.
hearing rumbles on the street when I'm in the groups that are the real estate groups that I'm in from all over the country, of people starting to see $1 commission listed. So we're already seeing the sellers stopping paying the buyer's agents, and I think that's going to be where things probably end up going.
I disagree. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think that there is value in the right buyer's agent. I'm speaking from a buyer's agent perspective. My value is not worth a dollar. I will tell you that. So for the right buyer's agents who offer and deliver the right product, service, and have the right value, those people will always be in demand. There will be something a
Absolutely.
little bit in between. You're going to have to negotiate for that. I think that there is going to be a backlash for the people who are providing zero to those buyers'
Well,
agents.
it's going to be a
That's,
conundrum, right? Because
yeah,
ethically, if you're a buyer's agent and you've negotiated a contract, so let's talk post August, not today, but let's talk about what happens after August 17th. Everybody knows you have to have a contract in place with that buyer. Everybody
yeah.
knows you had to have negotiated a price with that buyer for what it's going to cost to do the transaction.
Hmm.
They also know that they don't have to list publicly what they are or are not paying you. If your
Hmm.
buyer comes to you and says, "I want to look at the house at 1234 Candy Lane, and I'm interested in that house," you as an agent are not able to contact that person, find out they're paying 0%, and then go to your buyer and say, "I'm not going to show you the house." You can go to
Hmm.
your buyer and say, "Hey, just as a heads up, this house is paying 0, which means per our contract, you are going to have to pay me." So you can
Hmm.
have that conversation, but you can't refuse to show the house. And so it's going to create these like really awkward, uncomfortable, difficult conversations
Yeah.
when people do offer 0. And I think you're right. I think there's going to be some area of middle ground where they don't want that conversation to be that bad between the agent and the because the buyer may say, "I don't want to pay you, so only look
Yeah.
for places where the seller's paying me." The buyer
Yeah.
might say that, but the buyer might not say that. They might say, "Well, we'll try to negotiate it at the end with credits
Hmm.
or whatever," and
Right.
maybe the negotiation doesn't work. Like maybe,
And
maybe
I'll tell
maybe you
you,
try, but you don't, and then it's gonna
yeah.
create a really weird situation. I am as a, someone who also, represents on the buy side, I'm not looking forward to those conversations. Those are going to be hard conversations to have. But it will be interesting to see what the seller's market does in that vacuum of information. Do they start to drive prices down towards the bottom? And
And
I don't
I'll
know what they're
say
going to do.
I'll say what I've been doing for my buyers, because I do recognize that there are some buyers, particularly the millennials, even the Gen Zers, who like to do their own search. They like to go and do their own open houses. There is a market right now for those agents who, or for those customers who are willing to do more boots on the ground work. I'm willing to compensate them with that, as from now
Yeah.
until August, with part of my commission while commissions are still being offered. But I'm also saying, look, you buyer have a separate package. You buyer are the ones that you're going to want to do a little bit of your own search. I do the contracting, I do the negotiation. That's what our roles are. So I think that there is going to be more discussion around splitting out the roles and looking
Right.
at buyer's agent with a buyer and what your partnership is and who is doing what and how are people being compensated for that or saving on the
Yes.
commission side. So right now, those are the conversations I'm having on the buyer side right now, because I am still working with buyers. I still want to work with buyers because I do enjoy
Well,
that process.
and buyers should be having that conversation. So a buyer should be right now when they're talking to an agent saying, what are the options for how we work together? Like what are and it's okay if the buyer is like, I want you to do everything. I want you to make all the phone calls. I want you to do
Yeah,
all the online research. I want you to send me a
right.
packet every week of options and I want you to go with me to look at all the houses. Great. We can do that. That's going to have a little higher cost than some of the other buyers who are saying, I don't I want to do the research myself. And
Hmm.
I'll show up to all the open houses. I don't even really honestly want you there for the open houses. I just want to go bebop around and do my own thing, not feel like I'm bound by your schedule. And then when it comes time, I want you to help me make it happen. And I think that buyers need to become a little bit more savvy in that, kind of part of the conversation in saying to
Yeah.
their agent, give me options, not it is the same thing every single time, because it's
Yeah.
not the same thing every single time. So
Mhm.
to your point, I think it also is responsibility of the buyers to be asking that question. And
Yes,
if the agent doesn't have an answer for that, you are working with the wrong agent, right? Because if
exactly.
the agent's not keeping up with the trends, then are they going to be able to deliver the best service possible? Probably not. And
Hmm.
so I think that you really need to make sure that you're getting smart with the questions that you're asking your agents on the sell side and the buy side, not just the sell side, but also the buy side,
Yeah.
to make sure that you're getting an agent who is reading the tea leaves, seeing where the market is going, and making proper adjustments, to help service the clients as best as possible.
Awesome. Well, I know we can go continue to talk about this for a long time, and I do
I've
think
got
that
3 hours.
a
Are we not?
second
This
part
isn't
or a
three
third
hours. This,
part to this. But I mean, this is a great start. There's a lot of information. There's more information that's going to come out. Um, Thank you for, sharing all of this
oh,
stuff
thank
that's
you. This is
happening on the
fun.
street. And, it's just going to be interesting to see what's going to roll out from all of this. So let's keep the conversation going. Maybe there's a part two on this.